The time is just gone 9:36 a.m. and yesterday we spoke briefly about the anniversary of journalist Jamal Khashoggi, who was murdered in Turkey in the Saudi embassy. Now, 3 years later, we still find that activists are urging action from Joe Biden on the third anniversary of the murder. And to take this discussion further, we're joined by retired U.S. diplomat now based in South Africa, Brooks Spector. Brooks, good morning to you. Welcome as always to the show.
Good morning. Good to be with you.
Yes, Brooks, 3 years down the line, and we still have got these demands for action coming through on the murder of Jamal Khashoggi. And the question is, it's just taking far too long, and year after year, we're going to see anniversary after anniversary, and nothing seems to happen.
Well, I mean, there are a couple of things there. One, there has been action. It's just not the kind of an action, perhaps, that those who want more have seen. I mean, there was a report in the U.S. government. A number of Saudi officials were sanctioned as a result of that report. The report mentions Mohammed bin Sultan by name, saying he was associated with them. But the real challenge, I think, and let me put this out there for you, is the way in which this happened. It didn't happen on U.S. soil. It didn't happen to an American citizen. And there's no immediate, easy way to come to grips directly with those who may have been the ones who metaphorically pulled the trigger or, used the chainsaw or whatever it was. It took place in the Saudi Consulate General in Istanbul, which is not U.S. territory, obviously, and isn't actually Turkish territory either. It happened to someone who's not an American citizen. He was a permanent resident, and he was a contributing columnist to the Washington Post, but he wasn't an American citizen. And it happened therefore to a foreign national, in this case a Saudi citizen, who had entered their consulate general on what he thought to be was legitimate business, which was paperwork pursuant to an impending marriage to someone in Turkey. And exactly where action is supposed to take place is, to my mind, at least a little bit awkward or confusing. You can't even, after all, go to the International Criminal Court because that requires that the government concerned pursue the action in the first place. And I don't even know, I didn't look it up, I perhaps should have, whether Saudi Arabia is a member of is a signatory to the International Criminal Court, or for that matter, Turkey. And I'd add further that the Turks, although they did engage in a search in the Consulate General's facility, and they were fairly vociferous about what happened, they haven't taken any legal action or diplomatic action either. So the case of Jamal Khashoggi's death, while it is pretty clear what happened, it's not open to an immediate and obvious solution. The other part of it, and I keep saying, on the other hand, I guess I have four hands at this point, is that for better or worse, and like it or dislike it, the U.S. and the Saudis have something of a strategic entente between them in terms of a balance of power in the Persian Gulf, and the Saudis' quiet hand in the new order that is seemingly emerging as a result of relationships between Israel and a number of Arab states in the region as well. So the situation is, it makes a tangled ball of string look easy.
Yes, and I think to untangle that ball of string appears to be a challenge from what you've just mentioned, Brooks, because the key issue here at the end of the day is looking at the political dynamics that have been playing out, the relationship between the United States of America and Saudi Arabia. Now, these are obviously priorities at this point in time, even at the expense of pursuing justice and accountability for the murder of Jamal Khashoggi.
But the question, as I try to explain, is exactly where does one seek accountability and justice? Where is the jurisdiction for the crime? Does it lie with Turkish authorities? Does it lie with Saudi authorities? Is it in fact something that the United States can do independent of the fact that it doesn't involve a U.S. citizen and that it didn't take place on U.S. territory? Although it obviously belies support for human rights and civil rights of the media and freedom of the press generally. I don't really have a good answer, unfortunately. I wish I did. I think one avenue, and it's not perhaps the best of all possible ones, but it's the one that seems to be there, is an effort by various people to continue to remind all the parties that this indeed happened. It did, in fact, result in his death, his horrific death, and that it was as a result of his pursuit of journalistic freedom and criticism of a regime that seems very unhappy with that.
Yes, and central to this obviously is Saudi Arabia. And, when we talk about accountability, obviously you've mentioned, and it makes sense in terms of what you say, Brooks, with regard to Turkey. It happened on Turkish soil, and obviously America is not obviously far removed from this. But the key issue here is Saudi Arabia and the will and the political will on the part of Saudi Arabia, firstly to be held accountable, but to make absolutely sure that justice is served.
Well, no, I mean, but remember too that within the Saudi governmental structure or royal structure, although I'm certainly no expert on it, Mohammed bin Sultan appears to be the center point, given the fact that the king and most of his relatives are not well versed in government, and the king himself is elderly and not energetic. And if Prince bin Sultan is the center point of this, it's almost like asking him to judge himself.
Definitely. And also, I think when one looks at Saudi Arabia, and when one looks at not only Saudi Arabia, but many of the Arab governments, they've basically been given a free rein to do what they want to. And also in terms of the media, because we know Jamal Khashoggi was a journalist, and in terms of silencing the media, even at the cost of a life that was so horribly taken.
Yeah, I mean, there are very few democratic regimes in the Middle East. Let's be frank about that. And even the ones that say they are have significant failings in that regard. I mean, you have to realize, as I guess, that Khashoggi understood the odds, and he understood this calculation, and he understood the game board that he was playing on, although he may have well thought that he was protected by his permanent resident status in the U.S. and his prominence in the pages of the Washington Post. Obviously, none of those conditions were true as far as it concerned his actual treatment and his subsequent death. This is one of these things where we're not going to see an easy answer, even if activists demand it. I mean, who are they demanding it of is the problem. And to ask the U.S. government to end its relationship with Saudi Arabia seems a non-starter. To ask it to put pressure on Saudi Arabia, well, they'll do some of that, and they have already. to ask the Turks to put more pressure on Saudi Arabia seems unlikely, and to ask the Saudis to put pressure on themselves also seems unlikely. This one gets put there as object example number one of what happens to an outspoken journalist when the people that he criticizes don't like him.
Well, Brooks, thank you for that. And as always, for your time with us this morning here on Salam Media on News and Views. We wish you all the best. We wish you safety. Please take care.
You too, and best to your listeners.
Brooks Spector with us on the issue and the anniversary of the killing of journalist Jamal Khashoggi.
Looking